Have you ever felt that someone is thinking about you even when absolute silence exists between you, as if that person's presence has not vanished, but merely changed form, no longer reaching you through words, but through something far more elusive, far more intimate? A sensation that cannot be proven, yet refuses to be denied. Carl Jung believed that human connections do not end where distance begins. They stretch beyond time and space, beyond logic and intention, anchoring themselves in a deeper realm of the psyche, a realm where energy remembers even when the mind tries to forget. In Jung's view, we are not only connected through shared experiences, conversations, or memories. We are bound through invisible threads of psychic resonance, vibrating within what he called the collective unconscious, a shared inner field where emotions do not belong to one person alone, but move, echo, and respond between souls that once truly touched. When someone genuinely feels your absence, it does not remain confined to thought. It moves through the body. It tightens the chest. It disrupts sleep. It appears as restlessness, as sudden waves of emotion that arrive without invitation or explanation. True longing does not behave politely. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask whether the timing is right. It announces itself through subtle disturbances in the inner world, through signs that escape rational order. And the deeper the connection once was, the quieter and more powerful these signs tend to be, because what was deeply felt does not need to shout. It only needs to surface. Jung understood that when a bond forms at the level of the psyche, it leaves an imprint, not a memory, but a mark. And marks of the soul do not fade simply because two people stop speaking. They do not dissolve with time. They retreat into the unconscious, where they continue to influence perception, emotion, and behavior. This is why some absences feel heavier than others, why some silences feel charged, almost alive, while others pass unnoticed. It is not the person you miss, it is the part of yourself that was awakened in their presence and never fully went back to sleep. When someone longs for you in this way, their unconscious seeks expression. And one of the first places it speaks is through dreams. Jung saw dreams as sacred messengers, symbolic communications from the deepest layers of the psyche. They are not random images or mental leftovers from the day. They are emotional truths dressed in metaphor. If someone repeatedly appears in your dreams with intensity, clarity, or emotional weight, it is rarely accidental. It is the psyche's way of saying that something between you remains unresolved, still alive, still moving beneath the surface. These dreams often leave a residue that lingers long after waking, a strange heaviness, a subtle pull, a sense that something has been stirred but not completed. You may wake up feeling exposed, vulnerable, or emotionally open without knowing why. Jung believed this happens because the unconscious does not respect the boundaries the conscious mind tries to enforce. What has been repressed seeks return, and longing, when denied expression in waking life, finds its voice at night. Within the collective unconscious, archetypal images act as carriers of emotion. Faces repeat, places reappear, gestures return again and again, not because you are trapped in the past, but because psychic energy has not yet found resolution. When someone misses you deeply, a fragment of their own shadow, the part of themselves they cannot fully face, may be bound to your absence. That fragment searches for you symbolically, reaching out through the shared inner field you once occupied together. This is why ignoring these dreams rarely brings peace. They are not asking to be analyzed away. They are asking to be acknowledged, to be felt, to be integrated. Because until the emotion they carry is recognized, it will continue to surface in different forms, demanding attention. And then there is silence, perhaps the most misunderstood sign of all. Jung taught that silence between two people can carry more meaning than any conversation. Silence is not empty, it is saturated. It is filled with conflict, restraint, fear, and desire coexisting in tension. When someone longs for you but cannot face their vulnerability, silence becomes their refuge, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. There is a silence that feels neutral, and there is a silence that feels heavy, almost magnetic. If you have ever sensed that someone has not truly disappeared from your inner life despite no contact, you are not imagining it. Jung described emotional complexes as clusters of psychic energy that surface unexpectedly. A person who has not integrated their feelings may avoid communication entirely, yet still carry you within them as an active emotional presence. This is why silence can feel louder than words, because what remains unspoken retains power. What was never resolved continues to press inward, seeking release. Silence, in this sense, is not absence, it is containment. A holding pattern where longing and fear cancel each other out, leaving only tension behind. You may notice this tension in subtle ways, in moments when their name appears in your mind without warning, in a sudden emotional reaction that feels out of proportion to the present moment, in a sense of connection that persists despite every logical reason it should have faded. Jung would say this is the psyche, remembering what the ego tries to deny. And then there are the moments that seem too precise to dismiss, the coincidences that feel meaningful rather than random. Jung called this synchronicity the alignment of inner states with outer events without causal explanation. When someone misses you deeply, psychic energy does not remain contained within them. It leaks into the world. It manifests through symbols, timing, and encounters that seem to mirror your inner experience. A song that reaches you at the exact moment you thought of them, a place suddenly charged with emotion, an object, a word, a memory returning without warning. These are not messages in a literal sense. They are expressions of emotional energy seeking acknowledgement. The unconscious does not communicate directly. It speaks through symbols. Small gestures often carry the greatest weight. A message written and never sent, an impulsive reach that stops halfway, a memory shared indirectly. These are not accidents. They are compromises between desire and fear. Attempts to touch the connection without fully reopening it, signs that the bond, though altered, has not disappeared. Jung believed that the psyche strives for balance. When a meaningful connection is severed externally but remains alive internally, the unconscious looks for ways to restore equilibrium. Sometimes, those ways are subtle enough to be overlooked, but they are never meaningless. If you have felt these signs, the dreams, the silence, the synchronicities, do not rush to interpret them as hope or expectation. They are not promises, they are reflections. They show you where emotional energy still flows, where something within you remains responsive. And that awareness alone can change how you relate to absence, to memory, to yourself. In the next part, we will move deeper into the invisible field of emotional energy that binds people beyond physical presence, and into intuition itself, the quiet messenger Jung believed was capable of perceiving truths the mind cannot grasp. There is another layer where longing reveals itself, one that does not rely on images, words, or even coincidence. It lives in sensation, in the body, in the atmosphere between things. Jung believed that the psyche is not sealed within the individual, but participates in a shared emotional field. When two people have formed a genuine bond, that field does not collapse when they separate. It thins, it stretches, but it does not vanish. And when one soul begins to yearn intensely, that yearning creates a vibration, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet real. Have you ever felt a sudden heaviness without knowing why? A quiet restlessness that settles into your chest as if something is missing, even though nothing in your external life has changed? Jung would say, this is not imagination, it is resonance. Emotional energy moving across a connection that still exists at a psychic level. The body often perceives what the mind cannot explain, a tightening in the stomach, a wave of sadness that arrives without a story, a sense of closeness that feels inexplicable, almost intrusive. This is what Jung referred to as the psychic field, an invisible dynamic space that forms between people who have touched each other deeply. In this field, emotions circulate, they echo, they respond, even across distance, even across time. When someone genuinely longs for you, their emotional movement does not remain isolated within them. It seeks balance, and in doing so, it may reach you as sensation rather than thought. This is why longing often feels physical, because the psyche does not live only in the mind, it lives in the nervous system, in breath, in posture, in the subtle shifts of mood that have no clear cause. When you feel inexplicable sadness, nostalgia, or emotional weight without a narrative, it may not be entirely yours. Jung believed that shared emotional experiences leave shared imprints. and those imprints can still respond to each other long after conscious contact has ended. This does not mean every feeling comes from the other. It means that deep connections blur the boundaries of emotional ownership. What you feel may be partially an echo, a reflection, a resonance with something stirring elsewhere. This is unsettling to the rational mind, which demands clear borders and explanations. But the psyche does not operate that way. It moves through symbols, sensations, and energies that overlap. And then there is intuition, perhaps the most misunderstood and most powerful of all signs. Jung regarded intuition as a primary function of the psyche, not inferior to thinking or feeling, but deeper. Intuition does not argue. It does not explain. It knows, quietly, instantly, often without evidence. When someone longs for you sincerely, intuition becomes the channel through which that presence is perceived. Have you ever felt the sudden urge to reach out to someone you have not thought about in a long time, or sensed, without reason, that you were present in someone else's thoughts? These moments are often dismissed as coincidence or nostalgia. Jung would disagree. He believed intuition is the psyche's way of perceiving patterns that consciousness cannot yet articulate, a form of inner perception that bypasses logic and speaks directly from the self. The self, in Jungian psychology, is the center of the psyche, the organizing principle that seeks wholeness and integration. When a connection has been meaningful but unresolved, the self does not forget it, it holds it. And intuition becomes the whisper through which that unfinished energy announces itself, not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. Intuition does not shout because it does not need to persuade. It appears as a quiet certainty, a feeling that something is present even when nothing is visible, a sense of being thought of without proof. This is not fantasy, it is sensitivity, the capacity to perceive subtle emotional shifts. Jung believed that those who are deeply intuitive are often more affected by unspoken connections, precisely because they are attuned to the unconscious field where such bonds live. If you have felt this, the sudden knowing, the unexplainable pull, it does not necessarily mean reunion is imminent. Intuition is not prophecy, it is perception. It shows you where energy still flows, where something remains alive, asking to be seen. And sometimes, that something is mutual longing caught in the same silent tension. There are people who walk away not because they feel nothing, but because feeling too much threatens their sense of control. Pride, fear, unresolved wounds, these can all become barriers. But barriers do not erase emotion, they only redirect it inward. Jung taught that what is denied consciously returns unconsciously, and often it returns through the body, through mood, through intuition. This is why someone may appear calm, distant, resolved, and yet feel restless, fatigued, or emotionally unsettled without knowing why. The unconscious is signaling that something remains unintegrated, that a bond was not simply external, but archetypal, touching something universal within the psyche. Such bonds do not disappear, they transform, they wait. And perhaps this is the most difficult truth to accept. Longing does not always seek reunion. Sometimes it seeks recognition, understanding, integration. The psyche does not demand that the other return. It demands that the meaning of the connection be acknowledged, that the emotional truth be honored rather than denied. In the next part, we will move even deeper beyond signs and sensations into the raw core of absence itself, where nostalgia becomes a teacher, pain becomes information, and the soul begins its quiet alchemy, transforming longing not into attachment, but into awareness. There are moments when absence stops being a fact and becomes an atmosphere. You are not actively thinking of them, yet they are everywhere, in the pauses between tasks, in the way your breath deepens at night, in the subtle ache that appears when the world finally grows quiet. Jung would say this is the unconscious surfacing not to torment you, but to reveal something that has not yet been integrated. What hurts most is rarely the person themselves. It is the space they left behind inside you, a space that once held possibility, recognition, emotional safety, or awakening. When someone enters your life at the right psychological moment, they do not merely accompany you, they activate something dormant. And when they leave, that activated part does not simply shut down, it waits, it lingers, it aches. This is why time alone does not heal everything. Time only creates distance. Healing requires meaning. Jung believed that pain persists when it has not been understood. When longing continues long after logic says it should end, it is often because the psyche is asking a deeper question. What did this connection awaken in me that I have not yet reclaimed? You may tell yourself you have moved on. You may function, adapt, even thrive, and still something returns, not dramatically, but persistently. A word, a scent, a certain quality in another person's voice. And suddenly, without warning, your inner world shifts. This is not regression, it is memory stored in the body, emotion encoded beyond narrative. Jung spoke of archetypal imprints, emotional experiences so deep they embed themselves into the structure of the psyche. When triggered, they do not remind you of the past as something gone. They make it present, alive, breathing. And often, these imprints are shared. What you feel may not be yours alone. It may be the echo of a bond that once synchronized two inner worlds. This is where nostalgia becomes misunderstood. We treat it as weakness, as something to overcome. But nostalgia, in its pure form, is not attachment to the past. It is the soul remembering a state of aliveness, a moment when you felt seen, open, unguarded. Jung would say nostalgia is not about wanting someone back, it is about wanting yourself back. Sometimes the pain of absence is not because they left, but because a part of you remained in that connection and has not fully returned. And until it does, you feel incomplete, not broken incomplete, as if a vital emotional function has been paused mid-motion. This is why the question, do they still miss me, often hides a deeper one. Why does this still matter to me? The psyche does not waste energy. If something continues to return, it is because it carries information. Longing is not a flaw, it is a signal. And like all signals, it asks to be listened to, not silenced. Jung believed that the soul does not heal by forgetting, but by integrating, by allowing what was unconscious to become conscious, by facing the feeling without trying to eliminate it. When you stop fighting longing, it begins to change. It loses its sharpness. It reveals its message. And that message is rarely about reunion. It is about transformation. Some connections enter your life not to stay, but to initiate, to open a door you did not know existed, to show you the depth you are capable of, the tenderness you can hold, the vulnerability you can survive. When such a person leaves, the psyche resists letting go, not because it wants the person back, but because it does not want to lose what it became in their presence. This is the silent grief few people talk about, the grief of losing a version of yourself. And yet, this grief is also an invitation to reclaim that part of you without needing the other to return, to integrate what was awakened, to let the memory transform into inner presence rather than outer absence. Jung would say that when this integration begins, the energy trapped in longing is released. It does not disappear, it becomes available. It turns into insight, compassion, depth, a new relationship with yourself. And slowly, something shifts. You stop waiting for signs. You stop scanning silence for meaning. Not because you have become numb, but because you have become present. You realize that even if they do miss you, even if something still moves between you, your life no longer depends on that answer. This is not indifference. It is maturity of the soul. In the next part, we will move into this final shift, the quiet liberation that comes when longing is no longer denied nor obeyed, but understood. When silence no longer wounds and memory becomes wisdom. At a certain point, something inside you begins to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It is subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, like a quiet realignment beneath the surface. You still remember, you still feel, but the longing no longer drags you backward. It no longer defines your days. Jung would say this is the moment when the psyche stops resisting and begins to integrate. Integration does not mean erasing the past. It means allowing the past to take its rightful place within you without controlling you. When you stop asking whether they still think of you, something essential happens. Your attention returns to yourself. And in that return, you discover that the connection was never meant to be a chain, it was a passage. Many people confuse healing with emotional numbness. Jung warned against this illusion. Numbness is not healing, It is repression disguised as strength. True healing keeps you open, but no longer dependent. You can feel without being consumed. Remember without collapsing. Love without needing possession. When longing transforms, it becomes clarity. You begin to see the other not as an idealized figure or a missing piece, but as a human being limited, wounded, searching, just like you. This does not excuse what hurt you, but it releases you from carrying what no longer belongs to you. Forgiveness, in this sense, is not a moral act. It is an energetic one. You let go because holding on distorts your inner balance. Jung believed that every deep emotional encounter confronts us with our own shadow, the parts of ourselves we project, deny, or fear. Often, we miss not the person, but the way they reflected something we had not yet claimed within ourselves. When that reflection disappears, the psyche aches until we learn to become our own mirror. This is where freedom begins. You realize that you do not need confirmation. You do not need closure from the outside. The soul does not wait for permission to heal. It waits for honesty. And honesty begins when you stop judging yourself for feeling deeply. How often have you told yourself that you cared too much, loved too intensely, stayed too open? Jung would challenge that narrative. Sensitivity is not a flaw, it is a capacity, a refined instrument of perception. And like all powerful instruments, it requires consciousness, not suppression. When you honor your sensitivity instead of fighting it, you stop seeing your longing as weakness. You see it as evidence that something real happened, something that mattered, and meaning, once recognized, no longer needs to hurt. There will still be days when memory returns unexpectedly, a name spoken casually, a song drifting through the air, a look on a stranger's face that echoes something familiar. These moments do not mean you are going backward, they mean you are human. Jung understood that emotion does not obey linear time. It moves in cycles, and each return, if met consciously, carries less pain and more understanding. This is how the psyche completes its work. You begin to carry the connection differently. It no longer lives as absence, but as inner presence, as wisdom, as depth, as a quiet reminder of what you are capable of feeling and surviving. And from that place, something remarkable happens. You stop needing the past to change in order to move forward. You become available again, not out of lack, but out of wholeness. Love, then, takes on a new form, slower, deeper, less desperate. You no longer seek someone to complete what was lost. You meet others from a place of fullness, curiosity, and grounded presence. Jung would say, this is the individuation process, unfolding the journey of becoming who you truly are, not despite pain, but through it. And perhaps the most profound realization arrives quietly. The connection did not fail. It fulfilled its function. It brought you closer to yourself. In the final part, we will arrive at the still point where silence no longer wounds, longing no longer commands, and the soul rests in a deeper truth, that the strongest connections do not always return, but they always transform. And then there is silence, not the silence that wounds, but the silence that holds, the kind that no longer asks questions, the kind that no longer searches for signs in every pause or coincidence. Jung would say this is the moment the psyche comes home to itself. When longing has done its work, when memory has spoken its truth, when the soul no longer needs to reach outward to feel whole. You may still remember them. That does not disappear. Some connections are not meant to vanish. They are meant to settle, to become part of the inner landscape, like a mountain on the horizon no longer blocking your path, but quietly reminding you of depth. What once hurt now informs, what once pulled now grounds. At this point you understand something fundamental. The strongest bonds are not always those that last the longest, but those that change you the most. Jung believed that certain encounters act as initiations. They open you, they unsettle you. They break old structures so something truer can emerge. And once that emergence begins, the other person's role is complete, even if the ending felt unfinished. You stop asking whether they still miss you, not because the question was foolish, but because it no longer defines you. Whether they remember or not does not erase what was real. The psyche does not measure truth by reciprocity. It measures it by impact. And if something touched your soul deeply, that truth stands on its own. This is where peace lives, not in forgetting, but in no longer resisting what was. You let the memory exist without letting it command you. You allow the feeling to pass through without building your identity around it. Jung would call this psychological freedom, the ability to feel fully without being possessed by feeling. You become gentler with yourself. You stop judging your sensitivity. You stop apologizing for your depth. You recognize that your capacity to love, to resonate, to feel profoundly is not a liability, it is your strength. It is what allows you to connect meaningfully, to live honestly, to remain human in a world that often rewards emotional numbness. And from this place, something new becomes possible. You begin to meet life differently, not guarded, not closed, but centered. You no longer seek someone to rescue you from emptiness because you have learned how to sit with yourself in silence without fear. You no longer confuse intensity with truth. You recognize steadiness, presence, mutual openness. If another soul enters your life now, it is not to fill a gap, but to walk alongside you. And if they do not, you are still complete. Jung believed individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires this moment of standing alone without feeling lonely, of being whole without needing proof. Perhaps this is the quiet gift hidden inside longing. It teaches you how to return to yourself. So if you are listening to this and feeling something stir, not pain, but recognition, allow it. Do not rush to label it. Do not try to resolve it immediately. Let it breathe. Let it speak in its own time. The soul does not hurry, it unfolds. And if this reflection resonated with you, if it put words to something you have felt but never fully understood, you are not alone in that experience. Many are walking this same inner path, quietly, honestly, learning how to transform absence into presence and memory into meaning. Stay with that awareness. Carry it gently. And if you feel called to explore more of these inner landscapes where psychology meets the soul, where silence speaks, and where depth is not something to fear, you are always welcome here. Until then, listen inward. The answers you seek have been speaking softly all along.